The Zorvith Empire had ruled the stars for centuries. Their warships were unmatched, their fleets vast and terrifying. Every species that had crossed them had either surrendered or been crushed. And now they had come across humans. Admiral Tyrol stood at the bridge of his command ship, watching the sensor readings with growing amusement. "Is this a joke?" he sneered. On the holographic display, a small human trade fleet drifted through the disputed zone. The ships were large, bulky, and slow, clearly designed for cargo, not war. Their hulls had no visible weapons, no shields strong enough to withstand a real attack. The humans had wandered into Zorvith-controlled space, and Cyril intended to make an example out of them. "Open a channel," he ordered. A moment later, a human face appeared on the screen. The captain was calm, almost too calm for someone who was about to lose everything. "This is Captain Reynolds of the Terran Trade Fleet," the human said. "We are on a peaceful mission. No need for aggression." Cyril laughed. "Peaceful? You're in our territory, Captain. You will surrender your ships immediately." Reynolds didn't even flinch. That would be a mistake. A few Zorvith officers chuckled at the human's foolishness. Cyril smirked. "A mistake," he repeated mockingly. "Captain, do you even understand the situation you're in?" He gestured at the display, where his fleet of 50 heavily armed warships surrounded the 10 slow-moving human vessels. "You are outnumbered, outgunned. Your cargo ships are helpless." Reynolds exhaled, almost as if he were disappointed. "We're giving you one chance to leave, Admiral." Cyril's amusement turned to anger. This human was mocking him. "Enough," he snapped. "Board their ships. Take everything." The Zorvith crew cheered as attack shuttles launched toward the human vessels. The humans had no visible weapons, no shields strong enough to resist. This would be an easy victory. The warlords of the galaxy would soon feast on another prize. And then, everything changed. Just as the Zorvath boarding parties neared the first cargo ship, the human vessels moved. Not slow, not clumsy, but precise, coordinated, deadly. The cargo ships shifted formation with unnatural speed, their bulky exteriors splitting apart to reveal hidden weapon arrays. Cyril's eyes widened. This wasn't a trade fleet. This was a trap. Before he could react, the first human ship fired. A single controlled energy beam lanced through space, not at a Zorvath ship, but at the attack shuttles. The beam didn't destroy them. It disabled them, cutting their engines in an instant. The Zorvith pilots inside panicked as their shuttles drifted helplessly in space. More beams fired. Each shot was perfect, precise. The human ships weren't missing. Cyril's amusement was gone, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. "Pull back," he ordered, but it was too late. The human fleet, once the laughingstock of the Zorvith, had turned the battlefield into a slaughter. Cyril's joke had just become his nightmare. Admiral Cyril's laughter had vanished. On the holographic display, his fleet was in chaos. This wasn't a trade fleet. This was a trap. The human cargo ships moved with terrifying precision, adjusting their formation like a well-trained strike force. This was not random. This was planned. Cyril gritted his teeth. Impossible. He had never seen ships this big move this fast, let alone cargo haulers. The Zorvath had expected slow-moving prey, but these ships anticipated every move the war fleet made. Then the real horror began. The dull metallic hulls of the human vessels shifted. Panels slid open, revealing hidden weapon arrays. Cyril's heart pounded. They were armed the whole time. Bright energy beams flashed through the void. But unlike the chaotic blasts of most battles, these shots were perfectly placed. They didn't destroy the Zorvath ships. They disabled them. One shot, one kill. Cyril's attack shuttles, packed with warriors, drifted helplessly, their engines fried. The warships that had approached too closely found their shields failing, their weapons offline. The Zorveth fleet had been neutralized, not through brute force, but through absolute control. Zyrol's claws dug into the command console. They could have destroyed us already. Instead, they were toying with him. A cold voice crackled over the comms. "Admiral, I told you this was a mistake." Captain Reynolds, still calm, still in control. Zyrol's rage boiled over. "Fire everything. Overload the weapons. Destroy them." The Zorveth ships that still had power opened fire. Dozens of plasma bolts screamed through space. And yet, the human ships vanished. Zyrol's eyes widened in disbelief. They moved. The massive cargo ships, each the size of a small city, evaded the attack like starfighters. They twisted and turned, their bulky frames bending physics itself. The plasma fire missed completely. A low hum filled the bridge. Zyrol turned. One of the Zorveth officers was staring at a screen, trembling. "Sir," the officer's voice was barely a whisper. "They're locking onto us." Zyrol spun back to the display. His entire fleet was being surrounded. The humans had maneuvered into a perfect kill formation. They had never been running. They had been herding the Zorveth ships into position. And now, the joke was over. A final message came through the comms. Reynolds spoke, his voice calm and absolute. "You have two choices, Admiral. Surrender or be erased." Zyrol's hands trembled. For the first time in his career, he felt true fear. Admiral Zyrol's throat felt dry. His mighty Zorveth fleet, 50 warships strong, was now surrounded. By cargo ships. No, not cargo ships. Something else. Something deadly. His mind raced. How had the humans done this? How had they hidden this kind of power? On the bridge, his officers were in a panic. "Our weapons are offline," one shouted. "Half the fleet is disabled," another cried. Zyrol clenched his fists. This was a disaster. On the screen, Captain Reynolds appeared again, his expression calm. "Admiral, I will say this once," Reynolds said. "Stand down." Zyrol bared his teeth. The Zorveth never surrendered. Never. "I'd rather burn my fleet to ash than bow to a species of traitors," he snarled. Reynolds sighed. "Admiral, you still don't understand, do you?" A flick of Reynolds' fingers, and the human ships moved again. Zyrol braced himself, expecting an attack. But there was no fire, no explosions. Instead, the human ships weaved through the Zorveth formation with chilling precision. Each time they passed a warship, their weapons flickered, just once. And one by one, the Zorveth ships went dark. Engines failed. Shields collapsed. Weapons died. In less than a minute, the entire fleet had been silenced. A deep, horrifying realization struck Zyrol. The humans weren't fighting them. They were showing mercy. They could have destroyed every Zorveth ship in seconds, but instead, they had chosen to cripple, to disable, to humiliate. This was worse than defeat. This was a lesson. Zyrol gritted his teeth, his pride screaming at him to keep fighting. But there was nothing left to fight with. Captain Reynolds' voice came through the comms one last time. "I know what you're thinking, Admiral. You want revenge. You want to strike back." The human captain leaned in, his gaze sharp. "But tell me this, if our weakest ships can do this, what do you think our real warships can do?" Zyrol's blood ran cold. A chill silence settled over the bridge. No one spoke, because they all knew the answer. The trap had closed. The Zorveth had lost. And now, the galaxy would never laugh at Earth again. Admiral Zyrol stood frozen, his mind struggling to accept the impossible. 50 warships, a fleet strong enough to conquer entire systems, defeated without a single human casualty. Not by a superior fleet, not by overwhelming firepower, by deception, by cargo ships. His bridge crew sat in stunned silence, eyes glued to the darkened control panels. Their once mighty fleet now drifted, powerless, at the mercy of the humans. The Zorveth had spent centuries conquering, crushing, laughing at weaker species. Now, they were the ones being mocked. The comms flickered again. Captain Reynolds' face appeared, his expression unreadable. "Admiral," he said, voice calm, "your fleet is disabled. Your weapons are offline. Your ships have no power. There is only one question left to answer." Cyril swallowed hard. "What question?" Reynolds leaned forward. "Do you want to live?" A cold silence filled the bridge. No threats, no arrogance, just a simple, terrifying question. Cyril's claws curled into fists. The Zorvath never surrendered. Their empire was built on strength. Weakness meant extinction. But this was not a battle. This was a message. He looked at the dead fleet around him, at his crew's terrified faces. His people were warriors, but they were not fools. They could not win this fight. Cyril clenched his jaw. "What are your terms?" Reynolds exhaled, as if relieved. "You leave this system. You report back to your superiors, and you tell them." He paused, his eyes cold. "You tell them Earth is not to be underestimated." Cyril's pride burned like fire, but he knew the truth. The Zorvath had miscalculated, and if they didn't learn from this mistake, they would not survive the next encounter. With a slow breath, Cyril gave the order. "All ships, stand down." The Zorvath war fleet had never surrendered before. But today, they had no choice, and the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Cyril sat in silence as his disabled fleet drifted through space. The humiliation was unbearable. The Zorvath Empire had never known defeat like this. Not in battle, not in war, but at the hands of a species they had mocked. The human captain, Reynolds, had given him a simple order: leave, report what happened, warn the Empire. Cyril's claws dug into his chair. His people would demand vengeance. They would not accept retreat. But deep inside, Cyril knew the truth. If Earth's weakest ships could do this, what could their true warships do? His comms officer looked up. "Sir, the humans are unlocking our systems. We can regain power in 5 minutes." Cyril exhaled sharply. The humans could have wiped them out. Instead, they let them go. That was the real message. They weren't just sprung. They were in control. Cyril turned to his second-in-command. "Prepare a course for the Empire. We return home." The officer hesitated. "Sir, what do we tell the High Command?" Cyril's fists tightened. What could he tell them? That the mighty Zorvath had been outmaneuvered. That humans had toyed with them before showing mercy. That Earth, a backwater planet, had shattered everything they thought they knew about war. He took a slow breath. "We tell them the truth." The words tasted bitter, but lies wouldn't save the Zorvath now. They had underestimated Earth, and if they made that mistake again, there wouldn't be a second warning. As the damaged fleet limped away, Cyril cast one final glance at the human ships. Silent, unmoving, watching. It was the first time in Zorvath history that an empire retreated from cargo ships, and the galaxy would never forget it. The Zorvath fleet limped home in disgrace. Admiral Cyril stood rigid as his warship entered the grand docking bay of Zorvath Prime. The moment he stepped off the ship, a dozen Imperial officers surrounded him. "The High Command wants answers," one barked. Cyril expected nothing less. Within the hour, he was dragged before the Zorvath High Council, a towering assembly of warlords, strategists, and conquerors. They stared down at him with cold, unblinking eyes. Councillor Vraxis, the oldest and most feared among them, spoke first. "You lost 50 warships to cargo vessels." His voice dripped with disbelief. A low murmur rippled through the chamber. Shame, outrage, disgust. Cyril met Vrax's gaze. They were not cargo vessels. They were what? Vraxis cut him off. Traitors, smugglers, diplomats. He slammed a clawed fist onto the table. Are you telling me that the mighty Zorvath fleet was bested by merchants? Laughter erupted in the chamber. Cyrul's fists clenched, but he forced himself to remain calm. You can laugh if you wish, but I warn you, those humans are far more dangerous than we ever imagined. The laughter faded. Vraxis leaned forward. Explain. Cyril inhaled sharply. The humans tricked us. They disguised warships as freighters. They lured us into an attack. And then, he clenched his jaw. They disabled our entire fleet without firing a single fatal shot. Silence. No one spoke. No one laughed. Because no one had ever heard of such a thing. Finally, another counselor, a battle-hardened general, narrowed his reptilian eyes. And why would they show mercy? Cyril's voice was low, because they wanted to send a message. He stepped forward, his voice growing stronger. They wanted us to know that if their weakest ships could defeat us, their true warships would erase us. A ripple of unease passed through the council. For centuries, the Zorvath had ruled through fear, strength, and power. But now, they were the ones afraid. Vraxis studied Cyril for a long moment, then sneered. So what do you suggest, Admiral? That we cower? That we bow to these humans? Cyril took a deep breath. No. I suggest we think. I suggest we understand what we're dealing with. Vraxis' sneer deepened. You sound like a coward. Cyril's eyes darkened. No, counselor. I sound like a man who survived. Vraxis stood. We will not fear these humans. His voice echoed through the chamber. We will crush them. Cyril's blood ran cold. The fools hadn't learned. The Zorvath were about to make the greatest mistake in their history. Admiral Cyril watched in silence as the Zorvath High Council erupted in fury. We will crush them. They are mere tricksters. The humans will beg for mercy once they see true Zorvath power. Cyril clenched his fists. Fools. They were treating this like any other war, as if the humans were just another weak species to dominate. Counselor Vraxis stood tall, his voice booming across the chamber. I propose an immediate retaliation. We send our full might to Earth and wipe them from existence. The warlords roared in approval. Cyril took a slow breath. He had done his duty. He had warned them. They chose not to listen. Permission to speak freely, Counselor, Cyril said, stepping forward. Vraxis narrowed his eyes. Say what you must, Admiral. Cyril met his gaze. This war will not end the way you think. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Vraxis' expression darkened. And why is that? Cyril's voice was cold. Because you have not seen what I have seen. He took another step forward, his gaze sweeping over the warlords. You laugh at their cargo ships. You think their deception was mere luck. You believe they are weak because they allowed us to live. Cyril's claws curled into a fist. You do not understand. That was not weakness. That was a warning. Silence fell over the chamber. Cyril exhaled. If you attack Earth, they will not hold back. And this time, they will not spare us. Vraxis scoffed. Enough of this cowardice. The Zorvath Empire has never feared any species, and we will not start now. Cyril stared at him, then turned on his heel. Then I wish you luck, Counselor, he said, his voice empty. Because you will need it. He marched toward the exit. What do you mean by that? Vraxis demanded. Cyril stopped at the doorway but didn't turn around. I mean that I will not join you in this war, he said. I will not lead fleets to their slaughter. And with that he left. 1 year later, the Zorvath Empire no longer existed. Their fleets, their warlords, their mighty armies, gone. Earth had not attacked first. They had waited. And when the Zorvath launched their grand invasion, they learned the horrifying truth. Earth's warships had never been cargo vessels. What the humans had used against Cyril's fleet was just a glimpse of their true power. The real warships. They didn't disable enemy fleets. They erased them. The Zorvath never stood a chance. And across the galaxy, every empire, every species, every warlord took notice. The humans had warned them. The Zorvath had refused to listen. And now, they were nothing more than a cautionary tale. Never underestimate Earth. Never mistake their mercy for weakness. Because when pushed too far, humanity didn't fight wars. They ended them. The end